From the moment I was born, I was my parents' golden child. I was the firstborn, the one they had hoped for and worked so hard to have. Growing up, I felt a strong sense of responsibility to be the best version of myself. My parents were always there, offering support and praise, and I learned quickly how to meet their expectations. They were proud of me, and I always strived to make them even prouder. For most of my childhood, everything was smooth, and the love within our family seemed unshakable. But then along came my sister, Minnie. Although she was born a year after me, we couldn't have been more different. She was the wild child, the one who always needed extra attention, the one who demanded to be noticed. My parents were always kind and loving toward her, but Minnie had a way of testing boundaries, constantly pushing against rules, and often trying to be the center of attention. And no matter what happened, it always seemed like Minnie's actions overshadowed my own achievements. It wasn't that I resented her, I didn't, but it did feel like she had a knack for making everything about herself. As we got older, the differences between us became more pronounced. I focused on my education and career, while Minnie was much more interested in her social life, boyfriends, and partying. She was always loud, outspoken, and unapologetically herself. I, on the other hand, tried to live up to what others expected of me, to be quiet, polite, and the picture of responsibility. Still, even though I had a different way of approaching life, I tried to keep the peace. I didn't want to get caught up in sibling rivalry, so I kept my thoughts to myself and didn't engage with her in a way that might escalate our differences. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the fact that it often felt like she was looking for ways to undermine me. Minnie always had this way of subtly mocking the things I valued. She would question my career choices, belittle my achievements, and dismiss my life choices, all under the guise of being just joking. It was exhausting, but I always told myself that she was my sister, and I had to love her no matter what. The turning point came when I started dating James. James was everything I had always wanted in a partner. He was supportive, respectful, and understanding of my career goals. We met while I was in college, and from the start, I knew there was something special about him. He wasn't like the other guys I had dated before. He wasn't threatened by my success or my ambition. In fact, he was proud of me, and he was happy to support me in any way that I needed. When I introduced James to Minnie, I didn't expect her to be thrilled. I'd always known that Minnie had a way of making everything about herself, and I feared she might feel threatened by my relationship. But I never expected her to react the way she did. From the very first meeting, Minnie made it clear that she didn't like James. At first, I thought it was just her being Minnie, being critical and judgmental, but as time went on, it became clear that her disdain for him ran much deeper than simple sibling rivalry. Minnie would constantly make snide comments about James, about how he wasn't good enough for me, or how he didn't seem to have his life together. She'd suggest that I deserved someone better, someone more like the successful men she had dated in the past. At first, I shrugged it off. James was kind and patient, and I trusted his opinion of our relationship. But then, Minnie started to take her criticisms further. She began questioning the dynamic of our relationship, especially when it came to our finances. "Do you really want to be with someone who's okay with you earning more than him?" she asked one day during a family dinner. Her question hit me like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't the first time she had made a comment like this, but it was the first time it had felt so personal. She was implying that James was somehow less of a man for supporting me in my career and being content with me earning more. What struck me the most was how Minnie couldn't seem to understand that a healthy relationship wasn't about traditional gender roles or who earned more money. James had his own successful career, and he was happy to support me in mine. We worked as a team, and that was what mattered. I calmly told her that our relationship wasn't about money or who made more. It was about mutual respect and love. I tried to explain to her that James had made a huge sacrifice by putting his own career on hold to help me achieve my career goals. He had supported me through difficult transitions, and we were both building our future together. But Minnie couldn't understand. She kept repeating the same tired narrative, that men were supposed to be the ones making more money, and James was somehow emasculated by my success. Things only got worse when I had to confront the issue head-on. One afternoon, when Minnie and my mother came over for lunch, the conversation took another turn. Minnie was complaining about her boyfriend, Larry, who had moved in with her but was unable to find a stable job. "Larry's just not pulling his weight," she vented. "He lost his job a couple of months ago, and now he doesn't do anything all day. He just sits at home, eating chips, playing video games, and watching TV. I'm the one who's paying the bills, and I'm tired of it." I listened to Minnie vent, and then, trying to offer a solution, I told her to be firm and kick Larry out. It wasn't right for her to be financially supporting someone who wasn't contributing to their shared household. If she was unhappy with the situation, she had every right to set boundaries and make changes. But that's when Minnie threw my own relationship back in my face. "So, should I kick James out then?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I mean, you earn more than him, right? So, what's the difference?" I could feel my heart rate rise. I had to keep calm, but her words were cutting deep. "Minnie," I said, my voice steady but firm, "the difference is that James and I are partners. We both contribute to the household in different ways. He's not sitting around doing nothing all day like Larry is. He's working on his own goals, and I'm supporting him just as much as he's supporting me." Minnie scoffed and rolled her eyes. "I just don't get it. How can you be okay with this arrangement?" she asked, shaking her head in disbelief. At this point, I knew there was no changing her mind. Minnie had made up her mind about James, and nothing I said would ever convince her otherwise. But what frustrated me the most was her insistence on trying to impose her values and ideas onto me. She had always felt the need to control the narrative of our lives, whether it was in terms of relationships, career choices, or even our family dynamics. Months later, after Minnie married Larry, things only continued to unravel. Their relationship was rocky from the start. Larry, who had once seemed charming and full of potential, turned out to have a bad temper. I saw it firsthand at their wedding when he got too drunk and started a scene with one of the waiters. I was horrified, but I didn't say anything. It wasn't my place to intervene, and I knew Minnie would never listen to me. So I just kept my distance, hoping that things would eventually get better for her. But things only got worse. Over time, I learned that Minnie and Larry had frequent fights, often resulting in Larry kicking Minnie out of their house. She would end up at our parents' house, staying there for days at a time while Larry stayed behind, sulking and brooding. It was exhausting for everyone involved, especially for my parents, who tried to mediate, but Minnie refused to listen to anyone's advice. The final straw came when I learned from a family friend that Minnie had cheated on Larry with one of her coworkers. When Larry found out, there was a huge blow-up, and their relationship hit a new low. Yet, despite everything, Minnie and Larry decided to work through their marriage. They even started attending couples counseling, although I was skeptical that things would ever change. Through all of this, I tried to remain distant, focusing on my own life and relationship with James. But then something happened that I never could have predicted. I found out I was pregnant. James and I were overjoyed. We had been trying for a while, and now, finally, we were expecting a baby. Our parents were ecstatic too, and we received their love and support every step of the way. We felt truly blessed, and for the first time in a long time, I began to believe that everything was falling into place. However, this moment of happiness was short-lived. When Minnie learned that I was pregnant, she immediately began to interfere, asking intrusive questions about the baby's name and offering unsolicited advice. She was eager to be involved, but I wasn't ready to share any details about the pregnancy with her. I knew how judgmental she could be, and I didn't want her opinion to cloud my excitement. So, I politely told her that no one would know the baby's name until the baby was born and the name was official. Her reaction was immediate. She tried to pressure me into telling her the name, saying that it would be best to get input from family members. But I stood my ground, telling her that James and I were going to choose the name ourselves, without any outside interference. Minnie, of course, didn't take this well. She insisted that we were making a mistake by not involving others, and it felt like she was trying to take control of something that was meant to be a joyful moment for me and my husband. At that point, I had had enough. Minnie's behavior had always been a thorn in my side, but now she was intruding on one of the most important moments of my life, and I couldn't tolerate it any longer. As the months went by, the tensions between Minnie and I continued to escalate. Our differences were more than just personality clashes at this point. They had become deep, underlying issues that permeated every interaction we had. Despite my attempts to keep the peace, Minnie's behavior only grew more intrusive and disruptive. She couldn't seem to accept that my life was moving forward in a direction she couldn't control, and that made her incredibly resentful. I had always known that Minnie struggled with jealousy, but it wasn't until I got engaged to James that I began to fully understand the depth of her feelings. James and I had been together for several years by this point, and our relationship was strong. He was my support system, my partner in every sense, and when we decided to get married, it felt like the next natural step in our journey together. But for Minnie, our engagement seemed to mark the beginning of an even more intense rivalry. She couldn't hide her discontent, and it wasn't just about the wedding or the attention I was getting. It was about her perceived lack of control over my life. She had always been the one who had lived in the spotlight, the one who had manipulated situations to make everything revolve around her. And now, with my engagement, it felt like I was finally stepping into my own life in a way that didn't require her involvement or approval. At first, Minnie's comments about James were subtle. She would say things like, "So, "How are things with Mr. Perfect?" or, "James seems nice enough, but I just wonder how long this will last." She'd tell me, "You deserve better than him," and try to put doubts in my head. I didn't bite. I had heard it all before from her. Her criticism of every partner I had ever had, her attempts to undermine me in subtle ways that weren't always obvious to others, but were painfully apparent to me. But it wasn't just the little digs or snide remarks that started to wear me down. What really began to take a toll was the way she would pit herself against James. It became clear that Minnie didn't just disapprove of our relationship. She was actively trying to sabotage it. She would come to family gatherings and say things like, "I just think it's weird that you earn more than James. Doesn't that bother him?" I tried to explain that James and I had an equal partnership and that he was more than comfortable with our arrangement. But Minnie wouldn't hear it. She would scoff and mutter something about how men were supposed to earn more than their wives. I'd had enough of her comments, but I couldn't just shut her down entirely. She was family after all. James and I were married soon after, but I never felt like Minnie truly accepted me as part of the family. It wasn't that she wasn't cordial at first. She played the part of the supportive sister, at least publicly, but I could sense the undercurrent of hostility beneath her smile. There were moments when I would catch her looking at me with a sharp, calculating gaze, like she was constantly trying to figure out how to undermine my happiness or success. One particular instance that stood out was when James and I had a small dinner party at our house to celebrate our recent wedding. The evening was supposed to be about us, about our new life together, and the beginning of our future. But as always, Minnie turned the evening into a circus. She showed up uninvited with her new boyfriend, Larry, in tow. Larry was a man I had only met once before, but I could already tell he wasn't a good fit for Minnie. He had this entitled attitude, like he was always looking for a way to get something from everyone around him without putting in any effort. He and Minnie made a strange pair. She was loud and often combative, while he was quieter, but I could tell he had a temper. As the night went on, Minnie started drinking more than usual, which only fueled her behavior. At one point, she began making snide comments about how James and I had arranged the seating at the dinner table. "Is it really necessary to have all the attention on you two?" she said, slurring her words slightly. "I mean, you don't have to flaunt your marriage like that." I tried to laugh it off, but it was becoming clear that she was intentionally trying to create tension. It didn't help that Larry seemed to enjoy the drama, egging her on with passive-aggressive comments of his own. Eventually, Minnie's true nature came out when she loudly proclaimed that she thought James was controlling me and that I was being taken advantage of. The entire room went silent. James looked at me, clearly hurt by the insinuation, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was done tolerating Minnie's antics. "Minnie," I said, trying to remain calm, "I don't know where you're coming from with that, but if you have an issue with me, you should talk to me directly, not make accusations in front of everyone." She immediately backtracked, pretending like it was all a joke, but the damage was done. I could see in James's eyes that he was upset, and I felt torn between wanting to stand up for my husband and not wanting to escalate the situation. The rest of the evening was uncomfortable, to say the least. We ended up cutting it short, and Minnie, as usual, didn't take the hint. As time passed, I began to notice how often Minnie's toxic behavior was starting to spill into other areas of her life, especially her relationship with Larry. Their marriage was nothing short of chaotic. There were constant fights, arguments about money, and increasingly explosive confrontations. Larry's temper started to rear its ugly head, and I became genuinely concerned for Minnie's well-being. One evening, I received a call from my mom, telling me that Minnie had come over in tears after yet another fight with Larry. She was visibly shaken, and I could hear the distress in her voice. But instead of asking for support or advice, she just seemed to want to talk about how everything was going wrong in her life, how Larry wasn't treating her the way she deserved, how her job was stressing her out, and how nothing was ever going her way. I tried to comfort her, but it always felt like she wasn't truly interested in hearing my perspective. Instead, she would just vent endlessly without ever taking any responsibility for her own actions. It was always someone else's fault. Her ex-boyfriend, Larry, her coworkers, never her own behavior or decisions. I had always been the one who kept my life together, and yet here I was, being dragged into her drama again and again. It wasn't until months later that I found out about the affair Minnie had with one of her coworkers. The news came through a mutual acquaintance, and I was stunned. It wasn't so much the affair that shocked me. It was the fact that she had kept it from everyone, even our parents, and acted as though everything was fine. When Larry found out, he was, predictably, furious, and their already rocky relationship hit a new low. Minnie, however, didn't seem to have any real remorse for what she had done. Instead, she started blaming Larry for everything, claiming that the affair was his fault for not understanding her or giving her the attention she needed. Their relationship only continued to deteriorate, but the drama didn't stop there. The day I found out I was pregnant was the same day I realized that Minnie would stop at nothing to make my life as difficult as possible. It should have been a joyous occasion, a time for my husband and me to celebrate the next chapter of our lives, but Minnie's involvement only made it complicated. The day I told my family about the pregnancy, my mom and dad were elated. They couldn't wait to be grandparents, and the support I received from them made me feel grounded. My parents had always been there for me, and now they were excited to help me navigate this new stage of life. But Minnie's response was entirely different. She immediately started asking about the baby's name, wanting to weigh in on what we had chosen. I had already discussed it with James, and we had a short list, but I wasn't ready to share it yet. We hadn't made a final decision, and I wanted to keep that to ourselves for a while. "No names," I said firmly. "We'll tell you when we're ready, after the baby is born." But Minnie wasn't having it. She pushed harder, suggesting that we get family input on the name, trying to make it seem like a collective decision. I knew she wanted to be involved in every aspect of my life, but I wasn't about to let her hijack this moment, too. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is something James and I will decide on ourselves," I told her, trying to stay calm despite the frustration building inside me. Minnie's response was to throw a tantrum, sulking in the corner of the room as if she were the one who had been slighted. Her insistence on controlling things reached its peak when I asked my mother to plan the baby shower for me. I had told my mom explicitly that I didn't want gifts, just a relaxed day with close friends and family. But when I arrived at the shower, I was stunned to see Minnie had invited a large group of people, none of whom I was particularly close to. The tension between us was palpable, but nothing could prepare me for what happened next. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.